Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ryan. Thanks for tuning in. And today I'm going to be drawing and painting this line and wash illustration. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to my channel, Art of Ryan Tully. Welcome to the inaugural Traditional Media Tuesday, where I do an illustration completely with traditional media. So what's this all about? Why am I doing this? Well, I love traditional media. Traditional media is important to me. And if you have been watching my channel or if you look through my videos, you'll know that I participated in Inktober this year. And my focus during Inktober was watercolor and completing my illustrations with watercolor. And I did the vast majority of them with watercolor. My goal was to acquire some skill with that medium and develop some skill as well, and I feel I did that. I feel I learned a lot, and I want to keep those skills sharp and continue to improve. To be honest though, recently, well, for the last few weeks now, I haven't done any traditional media illustrations, and if you've seen my most recent videos, you'll notice that I used flat colors, which I added digitally by way of Clip Studio Paint, which is the digital software that I have. And I like flat colors. You know, it's very much like my favorite cartoons, which are, you know, some of my main influences, which include the original Johnny Quest, Space Ghost, Birdman, and He-Man. And those all use line art and flat colors. And I love the way that style looks. And I'm also a big Ralph Bakshi fan. And Ralph Bakshi's animated films use that same, you know, good line art and flat color style. However, I like illustration as well. And, you know, I really did feel like I developed my illustration skills a little bit during Inktober. So I want to keep them sharp and keep going in that direction. The thing is, I tend to have kind of an all or nothing mentality, or like a one or the other mentality. So when I started using flat colors again, it was like, well, okay, this is what I'm doing. But obviously, that's not how it has to be. And I'm hoping that by doing traditional media, you know, on a periodic basis, I'll be able to find a balance. Because honestly, I did get a little bit burnt out doing, you know, traditional media all the time. But like I said, I don't just want to do digital flat colors all the time either. So this is a way to sort of ensure that I use both and that I stay sharp with my traditional media skills and continue to hopefully improve and develop. I did want to mention that I always draw with traditional media, with real paper, real pencils, real inks, but it's just the flat colors that I was adding digitally. So like I said, it's actually been a few weeks since I've done any traditional media illustration, and particularly watercolor. So I was worried that I'd be a little bit rusty, but I kind of got back into it, no problem. And I am pretty happy with the result. One thing about doing ink and wash is, of course, you have to use waterproof ink. And it sounds like a no-brainer, but one of my favorite pens to use when I'm just doing ink drawings is the Pentel Beauty Touch pen. Of course, the Beauty Touch pen does not have waterproof ink, so the water would smear the Beauty Touch ink all over the place if I were to use that pen. So if I'm going to do a watercolor illustration or a line and wash or ink and wash illustration, I have to make sure that I refrain from using the Beauty Touch pen and just use Tech pens exclusively. And actually, for a long time, I always drew with Tech pens exclusively. It's only within the last year and a half or 2 years that I started using the Beauty Touch pen. And the reason I like the Beauty Touch is because it's easy to get thick and thin lines, and transition between wide and narrow lines, and really vary up your line width quite easily with just the one pen. But with tech pens, I actually feel like I concentrate a little more, and that's a good thing, I think. And so I'm actually very happy with the way the line art turned out in this drawing. So this is my character named Sam, and I actually did an illustration of him during Inktober. So again, with watercolor, with the ink and wash style. And I'll put a screenshot of that so you can see the Inktober version. But for this one, I wanted to do a little more light and shadow, a little more contrast. And so I went with a third layer of the darker blue tone. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do this every single Tuesday. It might be more like every other Tuesday, but we'll see. But I definitely want to do it on a fairly regular basis, like I said, to stay in practice, keep my skills sharp. Anyone watching out there, if you're interested in traditional media, maybe you want to do this right along with me, and whatever medium or media you like to use. I'm using watercolor here, but I also like to use markers from time to time, or colored pencils from time to time. This might be a good time to break out your own tools and put them to good use, and to create your own illustrations. So one thing I had kind of forgotten about, that I sort of figured out during Inktober when I was doing watercolor every day, was that it's good to plan out the coloring process in such a way where you can do different areas at different times, and so you can do an area and let it dry and move on to the next area. And you want to make sure that the paints don't mix, so you do a separate area further away. I forgot about that, and I just went straight in, and as a result, there were a couple times where I had to stop and just wait for the paint to dry so I could put down the next layer and the next layer. So that's something to keep in mind. That's something I learned, again, the hard way by doing this particular illustration. Not that it's that big a deal. It's just a matter of waiting patiently. But you can actually avoid that by planning it out a little better, planning out your areas that you're going to color in which order. But anyway, here's the final result. I'm very happy with the way this turned out, especially since it's been a few weeks since I used watercolor or even markers or anything else. And definitely had to take that mindset of, doing layers, paying attention to light sources, light and shadow and midtones and so forth. But it was a lot of fun. Definitely going to continue with Traditional Media Tuesdays, and we'll see where we go from here. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.